What's up, fellas? It's your boy Freelancer here. So tonight I want to talk about one of my favorite rappers of all time, and that is Andre 3000. Probably my second favorite rapper from down south, and probably I'm not too sure where I put him on my all-time list. I'll get to that towards the end of this video. Yeah. So when I probably got into Outkast was around 2013. Obviously I heard about them from my whole life, but about 2011, I mentioned this before, where I got into hip hop and I got to them at 2013, right? And yeah, their first four albums are absolutely fantastic, and yeah, and I started with their first album, and yeah, and went from there. So the debut album to me, it's an absolutely great album. It really establishes a lot of the themes, or some of the themes that would be expected, or like terms that they use, like some of the slang and the catalogs, how to smooth, how to play, stuff like that, right? Which I think is great, and which is we always do it in a great and creative and interesting way. Some of the stuff they don't really have in later projects, some of the gun toting and stuff like that they have in this album, But even the gun toting, right, that Andre repents on later projects, like it's still really creative and interesting, and it's done, like I said, in really creative and interesting way, right? So like, for example, but Lord forgive me, I got to keep my Millenium, my name be doing fine till these homies want to claim me, you know what I mean? And it's like what? Like, that's just really, really interesting, and how, he had to rob people because, I think I mentioned this on Get Up and Get Out, where he said he had to rob people because of his mum losing her job on General Motors, which is really interesting. There's even I think that's Sugar Hill Gang reference on it, Bank Like Hank, like, it's like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, it's still done really creatively, and the first quote I gave you from, I think it was from Ain't No Thing as well, and another one as well, which is, My Heart Don't Pump No Kool-Aid, from Southernplayalisticadillacmusic, the song. And yeah, this album, man, like, it's really great, and I love songs on here, which don't really feature him, like Funky Ride, which is just a fantastic, great song, and there's a bunch of other songs here now I love as well. It's a fantastic album. Probably give it an A overall, and yeah, and the third eye stuff that they established more on later projects is hinted at on this album, especially with the song Deep, right? Especially with the bit where it says, but I don't have no funds, the gold I be wearing is really bronze, it weighs a ton and making my neck turn green, and I got a criminal record that never go green and never comes clean, right? And it's like, really? Man, if this is you being a fuck, then wait till you get to him, you know what I mean? Being on his third eye shit, yeah? And yeah, and one of the things I love about this future project as well is it's not just, it's the way he grabs you in, it's the way he starts with the first line, like on the Millenium of Atliens, where it says, my environment being stable like Chernobyl. It's like, what? Or on a mainstream where it says, when they said, like, yeah, they be doing swan diving as the name be Griffin von Ivan, and following it up with later bars as well, you know what I mean? Like, it's just fantastic, but that's how it grabs you in, you know what I mean? And same thing with Millenium, and how Millenium's talking about problems with, material possessions, and how mainstream's talking about problems with, breaking into the mainstream and with hustling and with stuff like that, and, the never-ending struggle. It's just brilliant. It's just absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. And on top of that as well, it's there's some just monumental lyrics and songs in here, like Growing Old, I think it's 13 Floor / Growing Old. And then on top of that, there's also great songs in here, like Jazzy Belle, comparing it to the character in the Bible, Jezebel, right? I think promiscuous women to the person from the Bible, Jezebel, right? And it's done in a really interesting way. And another thing I love about the way he delivers these almost third eye type bars on this project is that he's not just doing it, not just beating you over the head with a political or religious or whatever angle. He's just saying what he sees, and just comparing it to things that he knows, right? And that's what I love about it. That's why I really resonate with it, because it just comes across as like him comparing it to something that makes sense as well. It's not just doing a metaphor, or doing, something along those lines, like a metaphor or a simile, or or like a punchline for the sake of doing it, and comparing it to religious things, but doing it, he does it and he makes it make sense. He does stuff that are smart, that is really thought provoking, and yeah, and he does it throughout the whole of that album, and especially obviously probably my favorite part from him period is the bit where he goes like, I live by the beat like you live check to check. If it don't move your feet, then we don't eat, so we like neck to neck. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah, it's just, man, like, not every rapper has the artistry to pull something like that off, and that's what I love about Andre 3000. He's just one of those rappers to me where he's absolutely fantastic, and he already established that by Atliens, and he continues to do that and delivers even more so with his later projects as well. Yeah, so another thing I want to mention as well when he's talking on about his third eye sort of thing is that he's not just, doing it in a way that's, personal and great. He's also doing it in a way that's relatable, that a lot of people can relate to and compare themselves to, especially with the check to check, neck to neck bars and pretty much a bunch of other bars and and other stuff as well, right? And that's what I love about him. And with Aquemini, I think Aquemini is a brilliant album, absolutely fantastic, great, amazing album, definitely an A plus along with Atliens, and and there's so many great quotables on here too, like time upon a time there was a boy who died, lived happily ever after, and that's another chapter. And you just said like, wait, what? And then you're reading into it and you're like, oh, he's talking about him, almost like how he reincarnated himself as an artist, right? And it's just really interesting, it's really interesting to think about, right? And obviously the whole verse is, expands on this whole concept, right? Because that's like the first couple bars on the verse on Aquemini, and it's just on the self-titled song, and yeah, and like I said, grabs you in, and yeah, does a great job on obviously other brilliant songs like the art of the storytelling, Rosa Parks, synthesizer, how he's talking about automation of like breastfeeding and things like that, and I guess by extension you compare it to other things like music, and yeah, and it's just such an interesting thing as well, because it's almost compared to like New World Order by a New World Water by Mos Def, right? How like he's talking about water on his album in a really creative and interesting way, and it's almost like the same thing with synthesizer, right? With from Outkast, and another great bars in here as well when he says at the plot thickens, it gives me the Dickens reminiscent of Charles off Spottiedottiedopalious, right? And it's just brilliant, man. Like like the way he does common phrases like gives me the Dickens, and comparing it to Charles Dickens. It's just it's just really interesting, right? And I really love the way it's executed, and yeah, and there's a bunch of other great songs in here too, especially from a production standpoint. And now Stankonia, which to me, Stankonia is a great album. I love the incorporation of drum and bass and other genres on here too. I think it's a really interesting album and a great album. There's about 5 or 6 like fantastic songs on here. All the singles are great, fresh and clean. Sorry Miss Jackson, I love that, put up her mouth and out decline. B.O.B, just a brilliant song. B.O.B is like a top 10 Outkast song to me. I love the bit, just the way it starts first, in some national from the pound when I sunk the ground, you know what I mean? It's just like, what? Absolutely fantastic, you know what I mean? And yeah, I love those singles. And there's some album cuts I think are great too, like Spaghetti Junction. I love the way he says, homies elope with ski slopes and fall like avalanches, right? I just think that's just a brilliant way of just grabbing your attention and talking about, you know what I mean, how, yeah, and just talking about the problems within the rap community, right? And love the way how he also touches on with the Adidas bar, followed by I run like the MC with no heater, right? Compared to saying that how he gave up his guns the second he made it as a rapper, and I love that as well. Again, it's kind of third eye and kind of abstract to an extent, but it's not for the sake of doing it. It's not abstract for the sake of being abstract. It's abstract to enhance how he was feeling, because he didn't know at the time. Like he's almost saying like, yeah, this is some difficult thing I didn't know at the time, but I'm going to compare it to this to make it make sense, right? Whether it's a religious message or whatever, like an avalanche or whatever, right? And that's what I love about it. And yeah, there's a bunch of other great rhymes from here too, like, you know, speeches only reaches to those who know about it, of I think that's off Humble Mumble, and yeah, it's just brilliant, you know, especially when you think about it. It's just absolutely fantastic. And another thing as well is by this album, you could tell that the record labels were marketing, you know, were kind of separating the two, not necessarily as like it's artistically separating the two, because before this point, Big Boy and Andre were kind of marketed in the same line, like, you know, they were in the similar clothing and, you know, whether it's the like the pirate almost type gear of the Atlanteans or the more pimped out suits of Aquemini. But in here you could tell by the way Andre's being marketed, he's almost like the hippie, you know, third eye kind of guy, you know, with no shirt under, you know, crazy hand gestures, whereas Big Boy is more of a, you know, kind of like a stereotypical, I say stereotypical rapper just for the way he's marketed, not for the way he raps, although he's more streamlined than Andre, of course. But like, I love the way, like, you could tell by this album that people and the record labels were kind of like marketing Andre 3000 as being that guy who is on his third eye shit, who is doing something creative and different in the game, whereas Big Boy is more typical but still really dope as well in its own right. Yeah, yeah, and so the last two albums were yeah, not nowhere near as good as the previous four in my opinion, especially Idlewild, and I'm gonna give it credit though. I appreciate the fact that he kind of went into a different direction with the Love Below and with Idlewild, I guess. But the problem I have with them though is that they weren't executed as well. There aren't that many. Cause I listen to, you know, hip hop for its grooves and for its like for its vibes and for interesting production. And to me, these albums just nowhere near as creative or as you know, groovy or as danceable as the previous stuff. Now, The Love Below, I'll say, is still a decent album, right? There's still about 4 or 5 songs that I really like off here. I'll say about 4 songs that I really like off here. I'll go with me now, like Happy Valentine's Day, Prototype, Spread, and Vibrate. You know, I love those 4 songs. I'm not too huge in the singles and like Hey Roses. You know, I'm not too huge in the singles, especially not nowadays. They're not like super whack, but they're just not for me personally. They're kind of okay to me. But those 4 songs as well that I love from this album, from Love Below, and the Speaker Box I don't really like at all, to be honest. So it's I like less in this album. But going back to Love Below, so those 4 songs, he only really raps on Valentine's Day and Spread, right? And when he raps, he only does like a verse. So again, it's even less of a hip hop album than something like not Missy Elliott, the Lauryn Hill's debut, right? And that's the thing. It's like it's even less of a hip hop album than that. Then obviously a guy like me who loves hip hop isn't gonna quite like it that much. And I'm gonna be honest with you as well. I don't even think the neo soul aspects of that great and that consistent, right? And there are even some songs where he raps in here like For Life and Time of Benjamin or Day in Life of Benjamin, and I'm just listening to it going, okay, the verses are amazing, the lyrics are just, the verse is amazing, it's like a 5-minute him rapping, and I love the lyrics, but that beat is whack. I can't stand the drums in that beat, I don't get a groove out of it, I can't feel anything, I just don't like that beat, so I apologise, but that beat's just not for me. And that's the problem. Most of the album to me, like with Stankonia, like most of the album, outside of those 5 songs that I love, 6 songs that I love, I feel like that they were still good or decent, or at least are enough good enough songs for me to really say the album's like an A minus. But this album, I'll probably give it like a B minus. So I still like it. I just don't. It's just not on the same level as the first 4, right? So overall, Love Below, I mean, it's more like a hybrid album because it is a hybrid album. Speaker Box, I'll probably give it like a C plus. Wasn't huge in it, to be honest. There was only really like 1 or 2 songs, like I think it's Snap and something or other, which was decent, but yeah, wasn't huge in that album. And another thing as well with this album, or another song I want to mention is Funking Around. Is a great track. I think that came out in a compilation in between. I don't know if it's in between Stankonia and this album or this album and Idlewild, but that's a great track. I think it's got Killer Mike on it, or it's on a compilation. Yeah, but that song was brilliant song. And yeah, and Idlewild, personally, not that big on it. There isn't a standout song to me, but there isn't a song that's like really whack, but there isn't a song that I'm like, wow. It's just the whole album to me, it's kind of like C+. So it gets a C+ to me personally. I appreciate again that they went for something different. They're not just doing the same thing over and over again, but they're doing something different and it working, which is like Stankonia overall, and then there's doing something different for the sake of doing something different, and that's what I felt like Idlewild was. But I'm sure there are some great lyrics in there somewhere. I personally haven't really fished for them because I just don't care for that album too much. Now, one of the things as an under a 3,000 fan that I will have to say, unfortunately, is that and the reason why I don't elevate him past a guy like Scarface, who I would say is probably my favorite rapper from the South, is because he doesn't have a solo catalog outside of The Love Below, and on The Love Below he only really raps and he only has like 5 verses on it, so it's definitely not a rap album. And yeah, his lack of solo catalog really, really like, I don't want to say squanders, but his lack of solo catalog stops me from putting him in a top 10 list, right? And yeah, so apart from that though, I wish he came out, like, it doesn't have to be a great album, right? It could have like, let's say 3 solo albums and like 5 great songs between the solo albums, right? Between those 3 albums, let's say, and then I could put him in a list and I'll have, you know what I mean? But yeah, I wish he would come out with a solo album because, you know, he's a really talented, very introspective, reflective, and influential. You know, loads of guys, Big Crit, Kendrick Lamar, these guys wouldn't have careers if it wasn't for Andre 3000 and a bunch of other people as well. And yeah, he's just an absolutely fantastic rapper. Despite the last 2 albums not being that great, yeah, I still got a lot of love for his stuff. And yeah, man. And usual, like this video if you like this video, dislike it if you don't. Subscribe if you want to see more content, and let me know who you want me to review next in the comment section below, and how you feel about this video and Andre 3000 in general, and Outkast of course. Yeah, so see you in a bit. Peace.